Hi class, in this video we are going over self-justification. This is one of my favorite chapters in the book. It's a really interesting concept, and it's one that students tend to find the most interesting as well. So hopefully that's the case for you. Let's get started and see. First thing is, what is self-justification? Self-justification is the fact that when pressed to explain our actions, we attempt to construct a story that makes sense, but at the same time satisfies our desire to look good to ourselves and to other people. So you don't want to look like an idiot. You don't want to look like a hypocrite. You want to look like a good person. You need to justify what you do. So a couple of questions for you based on the Prasad research, or actually just one question. In India, there was an earthquake. And my question for you is, who was most likely to spread rumors that there was going to be another big earthquake, that there were going to be aftershocks, that it was going to be, a long time before water came back, all that stuff? Who was most likely to spread rumors of doom? Was it people who were close to the epicenter of the earthquake, or was it people who were farther away? So it was people who were farther away. This is similar to some research that Sinja did. What they found was that the people who were farther away, Sinja focused on the people who were close in. The people who were close in, they had comforting rumors. Things like, the water's going to come back tomorrow. I heard they made sure they're certain there's not going to be any more aftershocks. Happy rumors. The people who were farther away were the ones that were doing these scary rumors about another big earthquake, horrible things happening. The reason for that was the people who were close by and the people who were farther away were both afraid after this earthquake. Even if you're farther away, it's still a scary thing. The people who were close to the earthquake when it happened, near the epicenter, their fear was justified. They were at the center of a big earthquake. The people who were farther away, their fear was not as justified because they weren't in any real danger. They weren't near the epicenter. And so they had to create rumors to justify their fear. That's self-justification. They had to say, it's okay, I'm afraid, because there's going to be another earthquake soon. It's okay, I'm afraid, because we're not going to get electricity back for another week. So close by, happy rumors. Farther away, to justify their fear, scary rumors. So this basically, another way to talk about self-justification is to talk about cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is a state of tension that occurs when an individual simultaneously holds two cognitions, two thoughts, that are psychologically inconsistent. So you have two thoughts that don't match, and this, or a thought and an action, and this is going to cause you discomfort. Dissonance. You have to decrease that dissonance somehow. We don't like to feel dissonance. So before I get into this, I'm going to tell you a famous study connected with this. And hold on, do I want to tell this to you now? Yes, I'm going to tell you, or no, you know what? We're going to talk about the famous Festinger experiment with Carl Smith later on. So at this point, all I'll tell you is Festinger is the one who originally created the idea of cognitive dissonance. And because we don't like it, it feels unpleasant, you are motivated to reduce it. A famous example of cognitive dissonance is smoking. Smoking it was in 1964 that we officially learned that smoking was bad, if it wasn't obvious before. And 1964 is when the Surgeon General released a report saying that smoking causes cancer. And when this report happened, 90% of non-smokers believed the report. I mean, why wouldn't you? However, only 60% of heavy smokers believed the report. 40% doubted that there was actually a link between smoking and cancer. Why is that? Why was it 60% instead of 90%? You have this behavior, or you're smoking. So the cognition connect with that. I enjoy smoking. Then you have this knowledge. Smoking's gonna kill you. Those are in conflict. I enjoy it, it's going to kill me. Those don't match. That's gonna cause dissonance. And so you have to reduce that dissonance. So for a lot of those heavy smokers, the way they reduced it is by changing their thought about the legitimacy of the link. I enjoy smoking. It doesn't actually cause cancer. It's not actually going to kill me. That's how they could continue smoking. Or other things you can do for smoking. You'll see people who say, well, smoking might be dangerous, but you know what? Walking down the street can be dangerous too. Every time you drive a car, that can be dangerous. Life is full of dangerous things. Smoking is no worse than anything else. Or another common way it'll happen in one experiment, 60% of people who were smoking between 1 to 2 packs of cigarettes a day, so between, 20 to 40 cigarettes every day, called themselves moderate smokers. If you are smoking 40 cigarettes a day, you are not a moderate smoker. But a lot of the research talks about how very dangerous it is if you're a heavy smoker. And so they switch their thinking. I'm not a heavy smoker. I'm only smoking 2 packs a day. I'm a moderate smoker. That research doesn't apply to me. In another experiment done by Gibbons, what they found was that people who were heavy smokers who joined a smoking cessation clinic to get you to stop smoking had less cognitive dissonance because they decided that smoking wasn't really that bad. So when they first joined the clinic, when they were like, what do you think about smoking? A lot of them said, this is not a big deal. Smoking's really not that bad for you. It helps you continue smoking if you don't think it's actually dangerous. Another famous example of cognitive dissonance is Heaven's Gate. Heaven's Gate is, it was a cult. They died in 1997. Heaven's Gate was a cult that thought that there was a spaceship behind Hale-Bopp. Hale-Bopp was a comet that flew close to the Earth back in 97. It was a really big deal, all over the news. And so this cult thought that there was a spaceship behind Hale-Bopp and that the aliens in that ship were going to bring the souls of these people in this cult into the spaceship. And so the very sad part about this is that they committed mass suicide so that their souls could go up. 39 people were found dead in this home after Hale-Bopp passed. But before Hale-Bopp came all the way to Earth, they bought a high-powered telescope so that they could look and see the spaceship because they were so excited. So they bought this fancy telescope, looked in it, looked behind Haley Bop, and there was no spaceship. So you've got this dissonance. There's a spaceship behind Haley Bop. I don't see a spaceship with this telescope behind Haley Bop. What are you going to do to decrease that dissonance? For Heaven's Gate, the way they decreased it is they changed their mind about the telescope. We don't see the spaceship behind Haley Bop because the telescope is broken. They returned the telescope saying it was broken because obviously they're not going to change their thought about Haley Bop and the spaceship. The spaceship's definitely there. We just can't see it because this telescope is broken. So that is how they reduced that cognitive dissonance. So question for you, can you think of another example where someone has cognitive dissonance and then they change one of the thoughts so that they can keep thinking one thing they want to or keep, doing an action that they want to? What is an example? Okay, so let's keep talking. Again, in this whole chapter, we're talking about self-justification and cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance can come from the clash of two motives. We have our desire to be right, but then we also have our desire to believe we are right, to not have to realize that we were wrong and change our mind to be right. So we want to be right, and we want to think what we think right now is right, that we are right the whole time. And so cognitive dissonance theory predicts that we will seek information and then ignore it if we don't like what we hear, if it goes against our desire to believe that what we already thought was correct. And so an example of this was an experiment done by Lord Ross and Lepper at Stanford. And what they did was that they showed students two articles. One was a pro-death penalty article, one was an anti-death penalty article. So it was whether the death penalty deters violence. Should we have the death penalty because it discourages people from committing crimes? Should we not have the death penalty because it doesn't actually do anything to reduce the number of crimes? And all the students had sort of a predisposition. They were already leaning towards death penalty or anti-death penalty. The pro-death penalty students and the anti-death penalty students who read both articles each became stronger in their original beliefs. So as the pro-death penalty students were reading the pro-death penalty article, they were remembering all these facts that prove they're right, prove they were smart. And when they're reading the anti-death penalty article, they ignore that information. They just don't remember it. Same thing for the anti-death penalty people. As they're reading the anti-death penalty article, they're remembering all those facts that prove it doesn't stop crime. When they're reading the pro-death penalty one, they just gloss over that information. They're focusing on what proves their original position. And honestly, you see this sort of reasoning a lot when it comes to politics. When it comes to making a decision, you can have post-decision dissonance. Post-decision dissonance is when following a decision, especially a difficult one, people almost always experience this dissonance. Did I make the right choice? Should I have chosen a different path or a different thing? And so a good way to decrease this dissonance is to seek out exclusively positive information about your choice, and you ignore the negative information. So a few experiments connected with this. For the Brehm experiment, he posed as a market researcher, and he showed women 8 different home appliances. And he had the women rate how appealing each of these appliances were. After they rated how much they liked each appliance, they were told they could choose one to take home. Several minutes later, they were asked to rate all 8 appliances again. Because they had made a decision, this is the one I am taking, their ratings changed. They had a higher rating for the appliance that they had chosen to take home, and they had a lower rating for the 7 appliances that they did not choose. They wanted to justify their choice, why they chose this one appliance as the one to take, and so they had to think it was better and the other ones were worse. For the Johnson and Rusbult experiment, what they did was they had students evaluate the probable success of a new computer dating service that was going to be on campus. And they were asked to rate the attractiveness of applicants for the service and how much they think they would enjoy a date with that person. Some of the participants were dating someone at the time, some of them were single. If they were dating someone, they rated potential partners as less attractive. So heterosexual men who were dating someone rated female applicants as less attractive if they were in a relationship than the single heterosexual participants, male participants. For the women, the heterosexual female participants in a relationship rated the male applicants as less attractive than the heterosexual female participants who were single. Because they'd made their choice. They were dating someone. That person's their choice. And so they had to look down on other potential choices they could have made, the applicants for the dating service, so that they didn't feel bad about the choice they had made. But again, so if it was someone who was not a potential choice, you didn't see a difference between the people who were in a relationship and those who weren't. So when the heterosexual male participants were rating male applicants, like, how cute do you think this guy is? How cute do you think women would find this guy? It didn't matter if they were in a relationship or they were single, they all rated the guys the same because that wasn't a threat to the choice they'd made. Same thing for the heterosexual female participants. All the participants were heterosexual in this experiment. It didn't matter if they were dating someone or single, they rated all the women who were applicants for this dating service equally because those women weren't a threat to their own choice for the guy they were dating. So that is that post-decision dissonance. This dissonance reduction, changing your thinking in order to reduce the dissonance, is not a conscious thing. You do not know you are doing this. It's largely unconscious. It's effective because it's below that conscious awareness. You're not doing it intentionally. And so it's easy for it to happen. You're not going to stop yourself. You're not even aware you are doing it. For example, when you chose to come to McDaniel, the other schools that you had applied to after that fact, after you committed to McDaniel, you're going to think they're worse. You're going to be like, I'm so glad I chose McDaniel versus these other schools. And if for some reason you don't, then you might end up transferring. But you're not consciously doing it. It's just the way it happens. Question for you. Is this a universal thing? Do animals besides humans, for example, like monkeys, do they use cognitive dissonance as well? This is something that has been researched a lot. Yes, even monkeys, animals like monkeys, can show cognitive dissonance. For one experiment, monkeys were given a choice between 2 boxes of treats. After they made their choice, if they were allowed to switch their choice, they didn't. They stuck with their original box of treats. This is what they want. So because we see it in monkeys as well, there's a good chance there's sort of an evolutionary benefit to it. It helps you not get sad if you're not always second guessing what choices you've made. When it comes to brain research, the areas of the brain that are activated during dissonance include highly specific parts of the prefrontal cortex that are associated with planning and decision making. And Weston is someone who has researched this. What they did was they had participants who got dissonant information about their preferred presidential candidate, or consonant information, so information that went against, said bad things about their preferred candidate or were positive towards their candidate. And then they looked at fMRI results while they were doing it, while they were getting this information. If they got dissonant information, the reasoning areas of their brain were less active. If they got consonant information, the emotion areas of their brain became more active. So we are emotional and we are not very logical when it comes to dissonance. One part of dissonance is irrevocability. Irrevocability is when you're unable to undo a decision, to reverse a decision. Like, this is your final choice, you don't get to go back. Irrevocability is an important part of cognitive dissonance. So I'm going to tell you about 3 experiments connected with this. The first one, Knox and Inkster, they had people who were at a racetrack betting on horse races. And they stopped them either right before they placed their bet, $2 bet, or right after they had placed their bet. And they asked them, how sure are you that your horse is going to win? How sure are you in this bet that you're about to make or that you just made? So my question for you is, who was more sure that their horse was going to win? The people who were about to make a bet, or the people who had just placed their bet? It was the people who had just placed their bet. You can't go back to the counter and say, I changed my mind, I want to bet on a new horse. The choice you made is the choice you made. It is irrevocable. And so, because they've now got this potential for dissonance, is my horse going to win? I just put money on it. Yes, my horse is going to win. They have to be more sure in their decision because they can't change their decision. That is it. So the people who had already placed the bet, who had already made that irrevocable decision, were more sure that their horse was going to win the race. For the Gilbert article, Dan Gilbert at Harvard, he had students who were interested in learning photography, and they shot a roll of film. This was before digital cameras, so you actually got your roll of film. And they got to choose 2 pictures from that roll of film to print, and then they rated them, scale of 1 to 10, how much do you like this picture, these 2 pictures that you printed. And then they were allowed to choose 1 picture to take home with them, 1 picture to keep. Half of the participants were told, if you change your mind about which of the 2 pictures you wanted to keep, you have 5 days to come back and switch. The other half of the participants were told, this is your choice, you can't change it, this is the one you get. And then all of the participants were asked, after 2 days, after 4 days, and after 9 days, to rate the 2 pictures again. For the group who could not change their decision, the first picture they chose is the picture they keep. That's their irrevocable decision. At the 2-day mark, they rated their picture that they had chosen higher than previously. And that higher rating stayed the same 4 days, 9 days. Because they'd made this irrevocable decision, they had to justify it. I'm so glad this is the picture I chose. It's the best. For the group that had 5 days to switch pictures, at the 2-day mark and at the 4-day mark, their ratings had not changed. They did not rate the picture they chose is higher than the picture they didn't choose, because at that point it was not an irrevocable decision. However, at the 9-day mark, when it was past the window when they were allowed to change, you did see that difference. At the 9-day mark, they rated the picture they had as higher than they had at the beginning of the experiment and at the 2-day and at the 4-day mark, because now it was irrevocable. Now they couldn't go back and change. So it was that irrevocability that made the big difference. And then finally, for Cialdini, we'll talk about Cialdini a few times this semester. I mean, we'll also talk about Gilbert a few times. But what I love about Cialdini is that he was really big on kind of going undercover for his experiments. So, for example, in this experiment, he worked as a car dealer. You know, he worked at a car dealership for 6 months. And what they did for this experiment was they had an ad that was in the paper that listed a car for sale for $19,300. This ad was for a different car dealership. So people would bring this ad into Cialdini's dealership and say, can you match this price? And Cialdini would say, I can do better. I can give you this car for $18,942. And I mean, that everyone said yes, that's even better than the amazing price that was already in the dealership, that was already in the ad for the other dealership. So they'd say yes, and they would write the down payment check. Cialdini would go to start the paperwork. 10 minutes later, he'd come back and he would say, I'm sorry, my sales manager caught a problem with my math. I'm sorry, that price was wrong. I actually have to charge you $19,384 for this car, which is only $384, or only $84 higher than the ad, but all they have to do is say, no thank you, I can get it for, you know, almost $100 cheaper at this other dealership, goodbye. Most people did not do that. Most people would say, okay, I will pay that higher price, higher than the one that is advertised. Basically, when they had written that down payment check for the price of, you know, the agreed upon price of the $18,942, they were starting, it was like an agreement. It was saying, yes, I will do this with you. And they were starting to get good feelings, making that commitment, what they thought was an irrevocable decision because they had written the check. They've got these good feelings. They don't want to lose that. So they're already thinking, this is the car I need. This is the amazing one. I'm so happy I'm getting it. And so they were willing to even pay that higher price so that they could keep that car that they had started to think good things about. This is lowballing. Lowballing is when you ask someone for a small favor, they say yes, it's not a big deal. Then you turn that favor into a bigger thing. Because you've done it that way, they are more likely to still go along with the choice. So you ask for something small, they agree, then you turn it into a big thing, they still agree, they still go along with it. For example, what's a good example of this? For example, one time when I lived in Wilmington, North Carolina for a few years, which is on the coast. There's a very tiny airport, a commuter airport in Wilmington, 10 minutes from my house. And then there's a bigger airport 2 hours away in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina. And so my parents were going to fly out for Christmas one year. And my father was a preacher, And so he had to work on Christmas Eve, as preachers do. And so they were going to fly in after that. And they said, would you mind picking us up at the airport when we fly in Christmas Eve? And I said, sure, of course, because the airport's 10 minutes from my house. Yes, I will go get you after you fly in after your service. And then they sent me their flight information, and they were flying in at 11 p.m. in Raleigh, Durham. I've already said yes. I've already told my parents I will get you from the airport. And so they have turned it into a bigger thing. It's not driving 10 minutes from my house at 9 o'clock. It's driving 2 hours to Raleigh at almost midnight. But I've said yes. I've already committed. I'm still going to say yes. I'm not going to change my decision. So lowballing is, it's the same decision. Come get me from the airport. It's just what that entails, how complicated that is, that changes. It becomes a bigger thing. So that is lowballing. And I will stop there for this video.